And another coach goes down. Latricia Trammell has been fired by the Dallas Wings. That will be the main focus in this video. We'll take a bit of a look at Game 4 of the WNBA Finals, but really I think that just comes down to one question. Is Alana Smith playing, and can she be effective out there, or is she just going to be limping around due to her back issue? But first, let's get into the Dallas Wings firing of Coach Latricia Trammell. Yes, I speculated on this. Is the coaching carousel done? There were 3 scalps already, and I thought Trammell and Noelle Quinn were likely potentially in trouble and probably more rightly on the hot seat versus the other 3 that had already been fired, Weatherspoon, Wright, and Kurt Miller. But you just never know. I thought Trammell might be saved because of Greg Bibbs' past, which is basically firing a coach on average every 2 years. And that just is not a good management style. But no, Greg Bibb pulled the trigger on this. I note, once again, Dan Padover, at least he had the guts to have a press conference and answer the questions. He didn't give anything revealing or anything. We're going in a new direction and everything else. But I do give him credit for taking the questions versus Dallas Way after they fire a coach, or the LA Sparks or Chicago Wings. It's to release a statement. And Bibb released a statement. In part, it went as part of our year-end review process and in conjunction with our organization long-term strategic planning. Bibb said in a statement, I have decided to expand and strengthen our basketball operation through the hiring of a general manager who will oversee the day-to-day operation of our basketball group. The search for this individual has already begun, and I hope to have more news on the hire soon. The general manager will lead us in the search for our next head coach of the Dallas Wings. Now, here's the way Dallas is doing this. They're basically saying, hey, Greg Bibb isn't going to be GM anymore, and we're going to bring in a new GM. And they're trying to position this. I saw the ESPN piece on this, which points out Amber Cox left her role as Wings Chief Operating Officer to become this COO and General Manager of the Indiana Fever. With Cox gone, Wings President and CEO Greg Bibbs said he will hire a general manager along with a new coach. And this is basically just window dressing. Greg Bibb has always been making the call for the Dallas Wings. It wasn't Amber Cox. He's like a kid in a candy store. When the draft comes up, when a trade happens, he explains it and how excited he is about who they're bringing in. So he sees himself as the GM. Now, the question with this move right here, has this come from the top and they've said, yeah, Greg, we want your hands off of this. You will just do the books now. You are not to do the day-to-day. Will it really be a situation where a GM has power and Greg Bibb is kept out of basketball operations, or will this just be a GM in title and basically Greg Bibb has their ear and they will be beholden to whatever whim or how he sees things going? From when he fired Fred Williams a while back, basically they got into a shouting match and then he got fired afterwards. And that is how Greg Bibb has always had his foot in the door, and how this team, it's truly a reflection on him. 4 coaches in the 8 years they have been in Dallas, that's an indictment on the Dallas management style. And some will come at me in the comments, like after the last video, I sort of outlined the poor plight of these coaches as the ones fired have been doomed by their front offices, and others are like, hey, it's pretty clear if you lose as a coach, you're out and it's your fault. And I'm like, no, it's not, all right? Like, if you have good management, they understand what your roster and the limitations are. They're just looking for a scapegoat. And this one, you could make a case that Trammell deserves to be fired. And I did that in the video, basically saying she was brought in as a defensive coach. Their defense was terrible. And at the end of the season, after the Olympics, they had Satu Sabli back, and they had a chance to make a run to make the playoffs, and they collapsed. They got worse after the Olympic break. So you could say, yeah, that's on the coach. She needs to go. But I would say that roster was a disaster from the very beginning. First of all, you can be a great defensive coach. You could be Buddy Ryan, but I contend you are not going to have a good defensive team if you have Arike Ogumawale on your team. I just don't see her being able to play defense. Your team is going to be a nightmare. And much like Buddy Ryan said about the Houston Oilers, that chuck and duck offense, well, that's what the Dallas Wings run. It's give it to Arike, clear out, let her chuck it, and see what happens. If she's hot, we're going to have a great game tonight. If she's not, then we're going to struggle. But you can just point to the moves that Greg Bibb made in the offseason, and you might say, well, he didn't know all the injuries were going to happen. Well, Satu Sabli got injured in February, and they knew she was having shoulder surgery. They go into the draft, and they know Natasha Howard is a free agent after this season. And with the 5th overall pick, Aaliyah Edwards, a perfect replacement for her, and to give them more depth in the front line, is sitting there, and they decide to go with J.C. Sheldon. And Sheldon might turn into a fine player, but it was crazy. Like, there's so much less risk going big at that pick as well. She was a natural replacement for Howard if Howard walks in free agency. And then on top of this, the Wings decide they're going to go into the season with either Sheldon or Uzan from overseas to be their point guard, and that was just always crazy, and it wasn't going to work, and it killed them all season. And even with the drafting of Edwards, their season still might have been a disaster as Satu Sabli was out, but they would have been so much better set up going into 25, because right now they've got the best odds of landing the number 1 draft pick, and if they do, then they'll draft Paige Beckers and finally solve their point guard issue. I mean, I think it'll be a disaster. Her next to Arike Ogumawale, but Ogumawale is only on contract for another year. And then you would have had Edwards in the front court with Satu Sabli, who presumably they are going to core and keep and see if she can demonstrate that she can be healthy. But you really could have gone into 25 with good hope, as you would have had Edwards at the forward spot, potentially playing some center. You have Satu Sabli can go big. As well, you would have Maddie Siegrist potentially playing the small forward, Paige Beckers, and Arike Ogumawale. That's not a bad core, and gives you an option when teams go small, because right now, when you have Tiara McCowan out there, if she is not having a good night and dominating on offense, then oftentimes she gets killed on defense as teams with the shooting 5 put her in pick and roll and she gets punished, and they don't have anybody else to go to as her backup. Kalani Brown is a carbon copy of her, and that's what you need in the WNBA. It's no longer a league where you can just have giants and kill other teams. It's about having flexibility in your lineup, and they just blew it with that draft pick, and that's emblematic of the Greg Bibb era. If you are a Dallas Wings fan, your true hope is that Greg Bibb is truly relinquishing control of the team and will get in a good GM that can make proper decisions. I seriously doubt that, much like I pointed out with Magic Johnson, who's coming back or taking more of an interest in the LA Sparks and be fearful. I just don't see Bibb being able to back away and not meddle. You almost need him in a betting scandal like George Steinbrenner was, where he got suspended from the team and the New York Yankees were able to stack talent because he wasn't there to trade it all off with Jeter and all that. Now, Yankee fans will say I'm wrong on that, but either way, I think he's a meddlesome GM that doesn't really know what he's doing or doesn't do it well, and the best thing you can hope for is they get somebody in there that can make better personnel moves, as that's what the problem is with the Dallas Wings. In terms of coaching firing season, the other one, Noelle Quinn, she's the last domino to drop. This one's a tricky one. I wonder if the Storm are under pressure. As I said in my video, I think she's probably on record and performance and things like that. You could make the case that I could see Seattle basketball-wise making a change with her, as they've given her talent. Like, she had the talent before Sue Bird retired and Stewart left via free agency, and she couldn't get them to the championship. And again, they reloaded through free agency and a first-round loss, even though it was to the Aces. I could see how they would say that's not good enough. We need another coach that could stir this pot better. But the tricky aspect with this, if they fire her, then there are no black coaches in the WNBA, and that is not a good look, as predominantly the players are black in the WNBA, and not having a black female coach is an extremely bad look. And I imagine some will say, why do you bring race into this? And I'm just stating the facts. That is a fact. And the other interesting thing, we'll see these coaches that have been fired, which ones will be retreaded? Does Trammell have a better chance of being retreaded versus Tanisha Wright and Teresa Weatherspoon? It looks like Kurt Miller is already going to be recycled again. Like, it sounds like the Sky are interested in him. I don't know if they're just kicking the tires on that or not. but that would be interesting and would be another bad look for the WNBA if the white coaches get rehired. In addition, Vicki Johnson was rehabbing her image in Atlanta, being an assistant coach. Will she get it? Well, definitely not for Dallas because Bibb fired her in Dallas, so they're not bringing Vicki Johnson back. I can't imagine that. But the whole process, yeah, you had your go as a coach, and now we fire you, and then you are going to go be an assistant coach for 2 years and learn under a mentor and rehab your image, and then you get another shot. I don't see it. I think, again, it comes down to the talent that these teams bring in to the equation, as the WNBA is more about talent than coaching most times in terms of making the playoffs. And then once you get into the playoffs, I think the upper echelon coaches, it's about making adjustments on the fly and tweaking teams, which obviously Cheryl Reeves and Becky Hammond would be the two that are I think would be considered the best at that. Sandy Brondello, although she might be on the verge of a championship, I think she's slightly a level below them. Now, bringing to that, as I mentioned, I'm doing this video I'm doing the recording prior to Game 4. At this stage, it sounds like Alana Smith is going to give it a go and see how she holds up. I wonder if this is the situation of the starting pitcher. Do you have your starting pitcher go on 3 days rest? Are they better just trying to go without her and giving her more time and seeing if somehow, some way, they can gut out a win on their home court? Maybe a role player goes off, Zandalicini or something like that, versus having a halfway healthy Smith, where if you gave her the rest, you somehow win that game, then you can go into New York. No expectations of winning. Hopefully Smith is more healthy and you have nothing to lose because all the pressure is on New York to finish out. That's probably how I would run it. I probably would not play Smith tonight and see if you could get the win. One thing I do note is how the WNBA celebrated. We're going to go to a 7-game series, which I hate personally. I think you can tell who the better team is over a 5-game series, and the players honestly aren't holding up. Like last year, the Aces just barely held on as they lost Gray to her foot injury. I think Stokes went down as well. So they're barely holding up with the series they have. Why add more games? That's one thing the WNBA. They want to increase games and be like the NBA. No, be the WNBA. Short games, short season, much better. That's why I love it. I just don't go to the 80-game grind and wasteland of the not WNBA, but the NBA regular season, which is awful. WNBA, you do you. Keep the games at 40 and keep the series at 5. All right, now it's over to you. Do you see Noelle Quinn getting fired? Do you think Greg Bibb will keep his hands out of the cookie jar and stop GMing and let a proper GM run their team? As well, by the time this video goes up, I'm sure Alana Smith has played and gone for 45 points, 20 rebounds, and 10 assists, and you can mock me in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.